Hi everyone, this is Lara Hammock from the Marble Jar channel, and in today's video I'll give you my tips on engaging in healthy and positive conflict in your most important relationships. Okay, in previous videos I talked about maintaining boundaries to prevent relationships from blowing up and how to determine whether your relationship is even worth the energy that conflict requires. In this one, let's talk about how to ensure that you are engaging in conflict in the most positive, constructive way. First of all, check your motivations. So presumably the reason that you're engaging in conflict at all is because you care about this relationship and something has happened that bothers you, offends you, or otherwise makes you uncomfortable. It's very possible that you are pretty angry over this incident. So remember, the main reason you're doing this is to help heal your relationship. So if, when you check in with yourself, you find that your primary motivation is to scold, reprimand, defend yourself, or otherwise rant, then your motivations are all wrong and it's too early to have this conversation. So keep checking in until you've gotten past a need to lecture your friend on their wrongdoing. This is not about fixing their general behavior. This is about addressing where they stepped over your boundary. After all, they may have other friends who are fine with this behavior. So the only thing that should concern you is how they behave towards you and limiting that in your future interactions. So in order to get to a place where you are not lecturing them, you may need to take some time. So some people have the mistaken impression that if you don't say something in the moment, then you have just completely lost that opportunity. So I disagree. In fact, many times I think that it is kinder to go away, process the event, and get into a better frame of mind before you even bring it up. So even if you've expressed your displeasure in the moment, you may need to circle back around and address it again to make sure your friend or family member understands the significance to you. And it might take you a good long time to get to a point where you're not super emotional. And that is okay too. There's not a statutory limit on addressing problem areas. That said, here is what you should not do. Don't be angry, then let it fester, and then at some point when you're having an argument about a completely different topic, bring it up just to stick it to them. So that is cowardly and playing dirty. And it means that you haven't managed to muster up the courage to bring it up before, but you also weren't willing to let it go, so it became this sort of booby trap for your unsuspecting friend. It's not fighting fair, so don't do that. So take the time you need to calm down, be less angry, and be empathetic. So this can be so difficult in the moment when you feel wronged. After all, how dare they? But in the end, you care about this person, you wouldn't even bother to go through the trouble of healing the relationship. So generally, people don't mean to be cruel or neglectful or rude. They are just walking their own journey, which can be complicated and messy. So give them the benefit of the doubt. If you find that they did mean to be cruel or neglectful or rude, well, maybe you need to create some distance with this person. So you may find in this process that it helps to write it out. So I am a better external processor than internal. What that means is that I work things out for myself by talking through them. And this is true of most people. However, like most people, I don't always have a willing or patient listener to get through all of the processing that I need to do. My husband is long-suffering in this regard. So to relieve him of this tedious duty, I find that writing helps. I write one really messy, mean-spirited first draft that contains all of the vitriol that would totally poison the relationship if I actually said it out loud. And then I throw that away and I start actually drafting what I might say to the person. If you have a conflict-avoidant friend, you may want to pass this draft by them since they can immediately point out when you've been too harsh or you need to tone it down. Sometimes I can draft the final in one go. Sometimes it takes 6 or 7 iterations before I can get to a draft where I'm not ranting or lecturing and I'm feeling some empathy for them. So some people think it is cowardly not to have a face-to-face conversation when you bring up conflict. So I actually think that face-to-face isn't as good as written as long as you followed this process that I've outlined and systematically purged the anger from your missive. I think your message can be clearer and more disciplined, that you have less of a chance of going off script, and that it is kinder for the other person to have a couple of beats to process before they have to respond. In my experience, people's first reaction is almost always defensive, and this allows them some time to get beyond that before they respond back to you. So what to say? So this is actually fairly straightforward. It follows this template. I'm concerned, worried, or upset about blank. That bothers me because blank. What can we do in the future to prevent this from happening? So the second bullet, it bothers me because, should be something concerning you. what they call I statements in the biz. It's inconvenient for me. It hurts my feelings. It makes me feel defensive. It should not be a you statement. You are inconsiderate, you are rude, or you were offensive. It is not your job here to generalize their behavior, only to point out the behavior that affected you and why. In the conversation about how you can prevent this from happening in the future, you can discuss how you can provide better feedback in the future as well. The unspoken threat, of course, is that if things don't change, you will be distancing yourself from this relationship. And I'm all for direct communication, but this really doesn't need to be said out loud. It feels A, somewhat obvious in interpersonal relationships anyway, and B, it feels like a coercive tactic despite being a completely natural outcome of conflict that goes poorly. Response. So not everyone is good at conflict, and this has a lot to do with what we've witnessed and experienced throughout our lifetimes. We should really strive to be generous with our friends and family. They are not always going to respond perfectly. They will be defensive, they will lash out, they may blame or get emotional, but look for gestures of vulnerability, which are crucial for close relationships, and look for apologies even if they aren't perfect or they aren't fully verbalized. We are teaching people how to engage with us, and you can't expect perfection immediately, and you can reward people for making progress, even if it is little at a time. Good and bad outcomes. So how do you know your conflict went well? Well, you normally feel better. But make sure your friend feels better too. Sometimes we're so concerned with meeting our own needs that we don't realize we're stepping all over our friend in the process. Ask if they feel better afterwards, and if they don't, arrange to have a longer in-person meeting to work things out. So how do you know if your conflict outcome was negative? Well, you will feel worse, and sometimes you'll feel like you've been run over by a truck. So there are lots of ways for things to go wrong. They blame you, they don't take any responsibility, they accept all of your concessions, but they offer none in return, they refuse to change or compromise, they belittle your concerns, etc. The ability to have healthy conflict is crucial to good relationships. Otherwise, how do you communicate your boundaries? If things go badly, that's a really good piece of information for you to have. It will help you decide A, whether conflict is worth it at all with this person in the future, and B, how far to distance yourself from them going forward. Risks. So there are obviously risks in having any kind of conflict. You could end up creating a rift that your friendship does not recover from. Most true relationships are worth this risk. If the person decides not to speak to you again after you confront them, it probably wasn't a relationship that could go beyond the surface level to begin with. The other risk is that if you complain too much, people will start to distance themselves from you. People are who they are, and they show you by their behavior every day. If you really want them to be a totally different kind of person, perhaps what needs to change is your expectations. If you're disciplined about the method by which you approach conflict and you are empathetic, most people will be grateful for the feedback and it will strengthen your relationships. Let me know what you think. Comments are always appreciated, and thanks for watching.